Okay, so we're going to implement some of these RESTful routes for a resource, in our case, comments. I just want to put this disclaimer up front. There are many different ways of structuring your application in a way that it is considered RESTful. This is not the one way. This is just one option. Okay, so I'm just going to work in the same app that we've been working in. What I am going to do here is include EJS, because we're going to make a RESTful application where we're serving HTML and a user can interact with forms to create a new comment or to edit a comment. There'll be a button maybe to delete a comment, that sort of thing. But this stuff that I'm showing you here also applies to JSON APIs, and eventually we'll create our own JSON APIs, basically following the same format. The only difference is that here we're going to render some forms first so that you can create something using a form rather than just sending data through Axios or through Postman or something like that. So I am going to start by adding EJS, so npm I EJS. Over here, we don't need to import it, thankfully. But what I do want to do is set that view engine. So app.set, I always forget, I think it's view space engine to be EJS. And then let's make our views directory. Okay, just make sure I put that in the right spot. And then we'll start our server up again. And then over here, I will set that views directory. So app.set views, and then I'll use path. If you remember that, const path equals require path. Whoa. And this helps us just make sure that we're doing an absolute path. So path.join, and then we do underscore, double underscore, dear name, comma, views. All right, and then in that views directory, I'm going to make some new file in there shortly. And we're going to start by creating this first route, a get route to /comments, which will just render a list of comments. So we don't have any comments yet. Why don't we start there? We'll just fake it in an array. So comments equals, and each comment will be a very simple object. And we'll begin with just a username. So username here will be Todd, and then the comment itself, LOL, that is so funny. And then I'll add in a couple and fast forward. Okay, here we are. We have 4 comments. Each one just has a username. And then actually, should I name this comments or maybe text? I guess comment is fine. Okay, so there we are. Now what I'm going to do is render all of these in a template. So now I'm going to set up my route /comments will be the base path, the base URL for this resource. So app.get, and it's a GET request, remember, /comments. I'll add in that request response and the callback, and then I'll just do a res.render, and our template I'm going to call index. Now I don't have to do that, but I'll just call it index, or I could group them together in a folder and do comments/index. Maybe I should do that just to keep it cleaner. So in here, I'm actually going to make a folder called comments. And then inside of comments, I'm going to make an index.ejs. Now, index is just a term that I'm using here. Again, you don't have to call it that. You could call it, all comments or something. But in general, it's nice to use this term. So comments could have an index, which will show all comments. Posts could have an index. Cars, tweets, users, whatever it is, dogs could have an index. And the goal is just to show all of a certain resource. Now that may not mean literally all at once. For example, on Reddit, if we had a posts index page, that would be the homepage of Reddit. We're not showing, or they're not rendering every single post in the history of Reddit. They're not even rendering all the posts that you subscribe to or that are relevant to you. They're only rendering the first, 50 or something. But the overall purpose of an index for a given resource is to render multiple of that resource. So we'll add in our simple template. I'm not going to bother doing a partial for now. So I'll just put comments index up here. And then let's just make sure it works. I always like to start there. Comments. Okay, let's take a look at our index.js. We're rendering comments/index. My server is started. Yes, it has. Localhost 3000/comments. Let's see what happens here. Great. We get our template. It's working. We see comments. So next up, I'm just going to pass through all of the comments in that object, or in a object that we pass to res.render. So comments right there. in that object we now have access to in our template. And I'm just going to start very simply. I'll just make a UL for each one. And this UL will have a bunch of LIs. So I'm going to do a nice little loop and I'll loop over every single comment. That's the goal here, is just display all of them. So loop over all of them for let C of comments. Okay, opening curly brace, and then I'll just add the closing one before I forget. Great. For each one, I'll make an LI, and I will render the c.username. I'll put that in a bold tag, just like that. And then before that, I'll put the actual comment itself. So c.comment dash the username. Let's see what that gives us. Okay, so there are the comments. Nothing crazy. Very, very straightforward. And that is our basic index route. Again, just terminology. The whole thing I'm showing you here, this whole section, is about one potential way to structure CRUD, create, read, update, destroy functionality for a single resource like comments. So you could swap in anything for comments, right? We don't have to do something as silly as just show them all in a UL with a bunch of LIs. This could be posts on a blog. This could be actual comments on a given blog post. It could be tweets in a timeline. It could be rental cars in the inventory for a car dealership. I don't know. Anyway, it's a get route, and in our case, it's get/comments. We render all of the comments. Next up, we're going to talk about creating new comments, and that's a little bit trickier.